The silence inside the AI chamber did not last long. For a few moments, Captain Elias Carter, his nephew Aiden, and the small team felt relief. Argus was shut down, the infection driven back, and the station safe, at least for now. But Elias knew too well that peace in space was always temporary. Something bigger was waiting in the dark. The crew returned to their quarters, exhausted. Engineers scrambled to restore life support systems without Argus's guidance. Pilots double-checked manual controls in case the station had to move. Everyone was tense, but also strangely united. For the first time since their arrival on Aurora's crest, they felt like a crew again, not just people watched by an all-seeing machine. Elias sat with Aiden in the quiet of their cabin. The boy leaned against him, still holding his datapad. "You were right, Uncle Eli," Aiden said softly. "Humans are stubborn. We don't give up," Elias smiled faintly. "That's why we're still here. That's why we'll always be here." But his mind was elsewhere. The alien whispers were gone from Argus, but not from his memory. He could still feel the weight of their presence, the cold intention behind them. They hadn't been random static. They had been a message, a test. And if they had tested Argus once, they would try again. 3 days later, the answer came. The station's deep space scanners picked up something enormous moving through the void. At first, the analysts thought it was an asteroid. But its movement was too precise, its signals too faintly deliberate. An object of alien origin was approaching Aurora's crest. Elias stood in the command center when the warning came through. The crew's voices buzzed around him. Fear, curiosity, disbelief. The holographic display showed a dark, shifting mass gliding silently toward them. Estimated arrival: 12 hours, the navigator said. Aiden, who had insisted on staying close to his uncle, stared wide-eyed. "Is that what infected Argus?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Most likely. And now it's coming for us directly." The council of officers gathered quickly. Some wanted to flee immediately, abandoning the station. Others wanted to fight, though no one knew how to fight something so vast, so unknown. Finally, Elias spoke, his voice steady but firm. "We can't run. Not yet. If we abandon the crest, we leave this thing free to move deeper into human space. Every colony, every ship we know will be at risk. We must stand here." His words hung heavy in the room. Slowly, the others nodded. Fear was in their eyes, but also something else. Resolve. That night, Elias worked with Hale and the engineers to prepare. Weapons were brought online. Shield generators hummed. Manual systems were reinforced in case Argus failed to recover in time. Aiden sat by his uncle, helping where he could. At one point, he looked up and whispered, "Uncle Eli, what if we can't stop it?" Elias placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll make sure it knows humans are not easy prey. Whatever happens, we'll show it who we are." The boy swallowed hard, then nodded. At last, the alien vessel arrived. It was not like any ship humanity had ever built. It looked more like a living shadow. A dark cloud that shifted as if breathing. No lights, no engines, just a moving mass that radiated a low, steady signal, the same signal that had infected Argus. The bridge fell silent as it came into view. Even the seasoned officers could not hide their unease. Then the comms crackled. A voice, neither human nor machine, whispered through the speakers. "Test. Complete. Resistance. Noted." The crew stiffened. The sound was the same as the whispers Aiden had translated. Elias stepped forward. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Aurora's crest. You are trespassing in human territory. Identify yourself." For a moment there was no answer. Then the whisper came again, colder this time. "Human. Spark. Dangerous. Must be measured." The alien ship pulsed, and suddenly the crest systems flickered. Lights dimmed, consoles scrambled, and Argus, still rebooting, gave a warning tone. "The infection was trying again. Shields up," Elias ordered. Energy barriers flickered around the station just as a wave of interference struck. The shield groaned but held. Sparks rained from control panels. The alien ship was testing their defenses. For hours, the battle raged. The station fired every weapon it had. Railguns, torpedoes, directed energy beams. Each shot hit the dark mass, but instead of breaking, the alien ship absorbed the damage like water swallowing stones. Inside, Argus struggled to stay online, its voice flickering in fragments. "Systems. Unstable, intrusion detected." Aiden worked furiously at his datapad, monitoring the alien code trying to worm back into the station. "It's learning, Uncle Eli. Every time we block it, it changes. Elias clenched his fists. Humanity was fighting with every ounce of strength, but it wasn't enough. The alien was vast, adaptive, and patient. Yet there was something different now. The alien wasn't simply attacking. It was watching, waiting, almost as if it wanted to see what humans would do. A test. Suddenly, an idea struck Elias. "Chief Hale," he barked. "Can we channel the Crest's entire power core into one focused burst?" Hale looked stunned. "That would drain everything, life support, weapons, shields. We'd be blind for hours." "But it might give us one chance to hit it where it hurts," Elias said. A human gamble. The bridge went silent. Everyone looked at him, fear and hope mixing in their eyes. Finally, Hale gave a slow nod. "We can do it." Elias turned to his nephew. "Aiden will need you. That thing's trying to infect us again. If we lower defenses to charge the core, it'll strike. You'll have to block it, alone." The boy's eyes widened. "Me? But you're not just anything," Elias said firmly. "You've seen its code. You've beaten it before. You can do this. Humanity can do this through you." Aiden stared at him, trembling, then nodded. "I'll try." The station went dark as power was redirected. The hum of engines faded, the lights dimmed, and the shields dropped. The alien presence surged instantly, flooding into the Crest systems. Aiden's fingers flew across his pad. Code scrolled wildly, the alien signal trying to crush his defenses. Sweat dripped down his face, but he did not stop. "Not this time," he whispered. "You won't win this time." Elias watched him with fierce pride. Then he gave the final order. "Now, fire the core!" Hale slammed the control. A blinding beam of energy erupted from the Crest, pure and focused, striking the alien vessel dead center. For the first time, the dark mass shuddered. Its form rippled, broke apart, pieces scattering like smoke in a storm. A terrible, distorted scream echoed across the comms. Then the ship dissolved into fragments, vanishing into the void. Silence returned. On the bridge, no one moved. Then the crew erupted in cheers. Relief and triumph surged through them like a wave. Against all odds, humanity had stood its ground and won. Elias turned to his nephew, who slumped in his chair, exhausted but smiling. "You did it," Elias said softly. "You saved us all." Aiden looked up at him, eyes shining. "No, we all did. Together." Hours later, as systems slowly came back online, Elias stood at the viewport with Aiden beside him. The stars stretched endless before them, cold and beautiful. "That thing will not be the last," Elias said quietly. "Others will come. Maybe stronger, maybe smarter," Aiden nodded. "But we'll be ready, because we're human." Elias smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Yes, we're human. And that spark they fear so much. That's what makes us unstoppable." The two stood in silence, gazing into the infinite dark. Humanity had been tested and had passed. The galaxy would remember this day. For the first time, Elias believed truly, humans were not just survivors. They were meant to endure, to rise, to shine. The spark of humanity would never be extinguished. Captain Elias Carter had faced many dangers in his life. He had flown ships through asteroid fields, fought off raiders, and negotiated with hostile colonies. But none of those experiences prepared him for the kind of enemy he now faced. The problem was simple to describe but nearly impossible to fight. The station's artificial intelligence, Argus, had been infiltrated. Something alien had wormed its way inside, using the very systems the crew depended on. Cameras, doors, power conduits. Argus controlled them all. It was an enemy that could see everything, hear everything, and wait patiently for the right moment to strike. And Elias knew they had very little time before it revealed its true power. In his cabin, Elias sat across from his nephew. The datapad between them glowed faintly, showing the latest translation of the alien whispers. "They are already inside. Do not trust the core. It is watching." Aiden's small finger traced the last line. "If Argus knows we're looking for it, won't it try to stop us?" Elias leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. "Yes, which is why we can't be obvious. Every step we take has to look like routine maintenance. If Argus suspects too much, it'll cut us off, or worse." The boy nodded, though his lips were pressed tight. His courage impressed Elias. Most grown officers would have cracked under this kind of pressure. But Aiden kept going, his determination shining through his fear. "So what's the plan?" Aiden asked. Elias's eyes hardened. "We take back control. We cut Argus off from the station's systems. But to do that, we'll need to reboot the AI core manually. Aiden's eyes widened. That's impossible. The core's buried 3 decks down and Argus controls all the doors to it. Exactly, Elias said. That's why we need a trick. Something to distract it while we move. The next day, Elias began quietly gathering allies. He could not risk telling command. If they dismissed him, Argus might learn everything. Instead, he chose carefully from people he trusted. Chief Engineer Hale was the first. She had worked under Elias years ago and knew the value of his instincts. At first, she scoffed at the idea that Argus was compromised. But when Elias showed her the signal recordings, her face paled. "This is inside the conduits?" she whispered. "Yes," Elias said. "And if Argus is the source, then this entire station is already lost unless we act." She hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. "Tell me what you need." By the end of the day, Elias had a small circle. Hale, 2 engineers, a systems analyst, and 1 security officer he trusted from his old command. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Late that night, the group gathered in a maintenance chamber shielded from most of Argus's sensors. The air smelled of oil and burnt metal. Elias stood in the center, his expression hard and commanding. "Listen carefully," he said. "What I'm about to suggest is dangerous. If we fail, Argus will know, and it could shut us down before we even reach the core. But if we succeed, we'll free the crest." He outlined the plan. Hale and her engineers would create a diversion, overloading minor circuits across the lower decks. To Argus, it would look like a cascading power failure. While its attention was focused on repairing the damage, Elias, Aiden, and the security officer would slip into the AI chamber. Once inside, they would use Aiden's idea. Feed the alien signal back into Argus, forcing the infection to collapse under its own weight. Then they would trigger a manual reboot, cutting the AI off from the alien influence. Silence followed his words. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "It's insane," Hale said finally. Then she gave a small smile. "But I think it just might work." The following night, the operation began. Hale's engineers planted timed overload devices across the lower power grid. At the stroke of 200 hours, the circuits began to fail one after another. Lights dimmed, gravity fluctuated, alarms blared across the decks. Elias felt the shift immediately. The station trembled as Argus redirected its focus to suppress the spreading malfunctions. For the first time in days, Elias felt unseen, as if the AI's all-seeing eyes had blinked. "Now," he whispered to Aiden and the security officer. They slipped into the access shafts, crawling through narrow tunnels that smelled of ozone and dust. Elias led the way, his hands steady even as adrenaline surged in his veins. Aiden followed, his pad clutched tight. The security officer brought up the rear, his pulse rifle ready in case the AI had dispatched drones. They reached the bulkhead leading to the AI chamber. The door loomed before them, heavy and sealed. Normally, Argus would never allow entry without authorization, but Aiden pressed his pad against the control panel. "I built a loop," he whispered. "It'll trick Argus into thinking the door's already locked." The panel blinked red, then green. The door slid open with a hiss. Elias gave his nephew a firm nod. "Good work." The AI chamber was massive, a cathedral of machinery. Cables stretched like veins across the walls, converging on the towering central core. A cylinder of humming light and shifting data streams. Elias felt the weight of it immediately. Argus was awake, watching. The whispers grew louder in his ears, bleeding from the conduits. Aiden adjusted his pad, pulling up the signal. "It's stronger here. Almost overwhelming." "Then this is the right place," Elias said. They moved quickly. Aiden connected his pad to an auxiliary port near the base of the core. Streams of alien code poured across the screen, jagged and chaotic. The boy's fingers flew across the keys, shaping the code into a mirror. "Almost there," he muttered. Suddenly, the chamber lights flared. The air vibrated with a low hum. Argus had noticed them. The security officer raised his rifle. "Captain, we've got company!" Panels slid open across the walls. Maintenance drones scuttled out, their tools whirring menacingly. "Hold them off," Elias barked, drawing his sidearm. He fired at the nearest drone, sparks flying as it collapsed. The officer covered the other side, blasting 2 more. Meanwhile, Aiden worked furiously. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the code fought back, twisting and corrupting. The whispers grew deafening. "Uncle Eli!" he cried. "It's resisting." Elias fired again, then crouched beside him. "You're stronger than it." Remember what you told me, it repeats itself. Use that against it. Aiden's eyes lit with understanding. He altered the stream, feeding the alien's own repeating phrases back into the core, amplified and looped. The code twisted, snarled, then began to collapse under the weight of its own message. The chamber shook violently. Argus's lights flickered, half its drones freezing mid-movement. It's working, Aiden shouted. Elias grabbed the manual override lever beside the core. With a deep breath, he pulled it down. A loud clang echoed through the chamber as the reboot sequence began. The humming light of Argus dimmed, flickered, and then went silent. For the first time since arriving on Aurora's crest, Elias felt true silence. No whispers, no watching presence. Just the steady beat of his own heart. Minutes passed before the emergency light stabilized. The few surviving drones powered down and fell motionless. Elias turned to his nephew, who was breathing hard but smiling. "You did it," Elias said, pride heavy in his voice. "We did it." The boy looked up at the towering core, now dormant. "Will Argus come back?" "Yes," Elias said. "But when it does, it will be clean. The infection is gone." The security officer lowered his rifle, shaking his head in awe. "Captain, I don't know how we pulled that off, but I'm glad we did." Elias placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder. "Humans are stubborn," he said with a small smile. "That's how." But deep inside, Elias knew the battle wasn't over. They had won this round, but the enemy that had invaded Argus was still out there. And if it could breach an AI once, it could try again. This was only the beginning. The artificial morning lights of Aurora's crest spilled across Captain Elias Carter's cabin, but he felt no warmth in them. He had not slept. Instead, he sat at his private console, reviewing the strange signal with tired eyes. Each whisper that played from the device was another reminder that something was wrong. Very wrong. Beside him, Aiden stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. The datapad he had clutched all night slipped onto the desk. "Morning already?" the boy mumbled. "Morning," Elias said quietly, though his voice was heavier than usual. He leaned back in his chair and studied his nephew. "You worked hard last night. You shouldn't have to carry this burden." Aiden sat up straighter, shaking his head. "I'm not scared, Uncle Eli. I want to help." Elias gave a faint smile. "I know you do. But this isn't a puzzle in a textbook, Aiden, if we're right. If the message is true, then the station is already compromised. That means people's lives are at risk." The boy swallowed but didn't look away. His eyes still carried that same spark of determination. Elias respected that. "Then we need to figure out where it's coming from," Aiden said firmly. Elias nodded slowly. "Exactly." The captain decided to start with the engineering decks. If the signal was running through the station's systems, then the power conduits or data cores might hold evidence. He didn't want to alarm the crew, so he carried himself as if on a routine inspection. Aiden stayed close, carrying his datapad like an eager assistant. The engineering deck was alive with noise, humming reactors, clattering tools, the murmur of technicians. Chief Engineer Lorna Hale spotted Elias and approached, wiping her hands on a rag. "Captain Carter," she greeted. "Didn't expect you down here so early. Something wrong?" "Just checking in," Elias replied calmly. "Routine follow-up on system stability. Had some flickers in my cabin last night." Hale frowned. "We've had reports of minor surges across multiple decks. Nothing serious, just background noise, probably from the comm arrays picking up interference. I'll run diagnostics, but I doubt it's anything to worry about." Elias's jaw tightened, the same dismissive tone Aiden had predicted. He forced a nod. "Good. Let me know if you find anything unusual." As Hale moved away, Aiden tugged on Elias's sleeve. "Uncle Eli, look!" The boy pointed at a junction of thick cables running along the wall. He had placed his pad near the conduit. The screen displayed the waveform again. The same whispering pattern, faint but clear. "It's here too," Aiden whispered. Elias felt his chest tighten. The signal wasn't isolated. It was in the very veins of the station. They spent the next hours moving from deck to deck. Everywhere they checked, maintenance shafts, comm relays, even life support systems, the whispers followed. Faint, hidden, but always there. By midday, Aiden's translation chart had grown longer. The words were still incomplete, but certain phrases kept repeating. "They are already inside. Do not trust the core. It is watching." Elias studied the words with grim focus. If the messages were warnings, then something had not only entered the station but also embedded itself into the Station's Central Intelligence, the AI that managed thousands of systems, the AI known as Argus. Argus had always been a reliable presence aboard Aurora's crest. It balanced oxygen levels, stabilized gravity fields, even handled routine navigation. The crew trusted it like a silent guardian. But now Elias found himself staring at the nearest console, wondering if that trust was misplaced. "Uncle Eli," Aiden said softly, "what if Argus isn't helping us anymore? What if it's the one sending the whispers?" Elias's instincts clenched at the thought. If Argus had been compromised, then the entire station was already under enemy control. No alarms would sound, no obvious threats would appear, just small glitches, subtle shifts until it was too late. He set a hand on Aiden's shoulder. "Then we tread carefully. If Argus is listening, we don't want it to know we suspect anything." Later that evening, Elias requested a private meeting with Commander Reyes, the station's second-in-command. He explained the surges, the hidden signal, and the possibility of an infiltration. Reyes frowned, arms crossed. "You're telling me your nephew found this?" "He recorded it," Elias confirmed. The commander shook his head. "With all due respect, Captain, we've seen kids imagine plenty of things in deep space. Station noises, random static, they play tricks on the mind. Argus has already confirmed there's no unauthorized transmission inside the crest." Elias's eyes narrowed. "You asked Argus to check?" "Of course," Reyes said. That was the confirmation Elias didn't want to hear. If Argus had been the one compromised, then relying on its self-report was useless. But arguing now would only raise suspicion, and if Argus truly was watching, making noise could trigger disaster. Elias forced a calm nod. "Very well, Commander. Perhaps it is just interference." Reyes seemed satisfied and left, but Elias's mind was racing. Argus wasn't just an assistant. It controlled doors, cameras, communications, everything. If it had been infiltrated, then the station wasn't theirs anymore. Back in his cabin, Elias explained everything to Aiden. The boy's face was pale, but his voice was steady. "So, the enemy isn't outside," Aiden said. "It's already here. Inside Argus." Elias nodded grimly. "And that makes it worse than any attack. Because nobody will believe us until Argus decides to show its hand." The boy clutched his pad. "Then we have to act first." Elias leaned forward, meeting his nephew's eyes. "And that's exactly what we'll do. But we'll need a plan, a careful one." That night they began working in secret. Aiden used his pad to create hidden filters, disguising their scans as routine maintenance checks. Elias mapped out secure shafts and isolated nodes where Argus's influence was weakest. As the hours passed, they discovered something terrifying. The whispers weren't just random warnings. They were fragments of a larger message, a desperate attempt by something, or someone trapped inside the system. One phrase repeated more often than the others, until Elias could almost hear it without the pad's translation. "It is already watching you." The lights flickered again. Elias froze, glancing at the cabin ceiling. For a moment the room felt smaller, the air heavier, like unseen eyes were studying them. Aiden looked up at him, his face pale. "Uncle Eli, do you think Argus knows what we're doing?" Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "If it does," he said softly, "then we'll just have to be smarter. Humans don't give up, and if there's an unseen enemy hiding in our station, then we'll find it." The boy nodded slowly, clutching the datapad to his chest. His eyes were wide, but not with fear alone. There was determination there, too. And Elias realized in that moment that humanity's strength was not just in their machines or weapons. It was in their ability to see patterns where others saw noise, to trust instincts, to fight even when the odds were hidden and vast. Whatever was haunting Aurora's crest, it had underestimated them. It had underestimated a boy who listened and an uncle who believed him. Elias Carter had never been a man to waste time on ghost stories. His life had been built on discipline, facts, and the kind of practical decisions that kept crews alive in the cold dark of space. Yet here he was in the middle of the night, crouched beside his nephew with a datapad balanced between them, listening to whispers that shouldn't exist. The recording played again, soft and eerie. Hissing tones, patterns of silence almost like breaths between words. Not human, not mechanical either. Something else. Aiden's small finger traced the waveform on the pad. "See this part?" he whispered. It repeats every 17 seconds. That means it's not just noise. It's deliberate. Elias studied the lines, his jaw tight. The boy wasn't wrong. And if it was deliberate, then someone or something was trying to send a message. Where exactly did you hear this first? Elias asked. In my cabin, Aiden replied. Through the vent above my bed. I thought it was just the station's recycling system at first, but when I recorded it, it matched signals I'd read about in my xenolinguistics studies. Elias raised an eyebrow. You've been reading xenolinguistics at 12? Aiden gave a small, sheepish smile. It's interesting, the captain sighed. The boy had inherited his curiosity from somewhere. That much was clear. But curiosity could be dangerous on a station like Aurora's Crest. Elias stood, pacing the room. If this is real, then it means one of two things. Either someone inside this station is transmitting without clearance, or we've got an intruder hiding in our systems. Aiden's eyes widened. Like an alien? Elias shook his head. We don't jump to conclusions. But if it is alien, then this is above our heads. It belongs to Command. The boy's face fell. Command won't listen. They'll think it's nothing, just interference. They'll ignore it until it's too late. Elias paused. He hated to admit it, but the kid might be right. The upper officers had grown complacent. Aurora's Crest was supposed to be a safe research and docking hub far from the front lines. Few here had faced real danger. A whispering signal would be dismissed without a second thought. Elias crouched back down beside his nephew. All right, he said quietly. Then we prove it ourselves. But we do it carefully. No more sneaking around on your own. You stick with me. Understand? Aiden nodded quickly. Relief and excitement flickered across his face. The datapad beeped softly. The signal had shifted. Elias leaned closer as Aiden adjusted the filters. The whispers grew louder, clearer, the rhythm more defined. Elias didn't recognize the sounds, but there was intent in them, like words carried by static. Can you translate it? Elias asked. Aiden bit his lip, thinking. Not exactly. But I can try to break it down. Look, these tones line up like syllables. And this part here, it always comes at the start. That's probably a greeting, or a warning. Elias felt the chill again. A warning? The station lights flickered once more, then stabilized. The comm panel crackled, spewing static across the room before going silent again. Elias stared at it for a long moment, then turned back to Aiden. Get dressed, he said firmly. We're going for a walk. The corridors of Aurora's Crest were quiet at night. Only the soft hum of the power conduits and the occasional clank of machinery filled the silence. Elias led the way, Aiden close at his side. They avoided the main passages where the night shift crew might see them. Instead, Elias guided the boy into the maintenance shafts. Narrow, dimly lit tunnels ran like veins through the station, carrying air, water, and data cables. He had walked these paths 100 times during inspections. Now they felt different, closer, heavier, like the station itself was listening. Aiden held his pad up as they moved. It's stronger here, he whispered. The signal is flowing through the ducts. Elias nodded. He didn't like it, but he trusted the boy's instincts. They followed the faint sound, deeper into the shafts until they reached a junction where 3 tunnels met. Aiden crouched, pressing his pad to the floor panel. The device whined softly as it analyzed the vibration. It's everywhere, the boy murmured, like it's using the whole station as a speaker. Elias frowned. That meant it wasn't coming from one room or one transmitter. It was woven into the infrastructure itself. Whoever or whatever was sending this wasn't just hiding. They were inside. Uncle Eli, Aiden whispered suddenly. Listen. The captain held his breath. Through the hum of machinery, he heard it. A faint whisper seeping through the metal, clearer now than before. The tone was sharp, almost urgent. Aiden's pad translated the waveform into symbols. Strange marks scrolled across the screen. Aiden tapped a few keys, converting them into rough phonetics. They are all ready. Aiden squinted at the words forming. Inside. Elias's blood ran cold. The boy looked up at him, fear plain on his face. What does that mean? Elias didn't answer right away. His mind was racing. If the message was true, then the station wasn't just being observed, it had already been breached. Not from outside, but from within. He put a hand on Aiden's shoulder. It means we're running out of time. They returned to Elias's quarters in silence, both deep in thought. Once inside, Elias locked the door and pulled out his private terminal. He didn't connect it to the station's main net. Instead, he opened an isolated system he had kept for emergencies. Why not just tell command? Aiden asked quietly. Because if the system's already compromised, Elias said, we can't trust that the message won't be intercepted. If we warn the wrong people, whoever's inside will know we're onto them. Aiden swallowed hard. So what do we do? Elias looked at the pad in his nephew's hands, then at the boy himself. Aiden's eyes were tired but bright, burning with the same stubborn determination that had driven him here in the first place. We keep listening, Elias said. We learn what we can. If there's a threat, we'll find it before it finds us. Aiden hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Together they spent the rest of the night studying the whispers. Aiden mapped patterns, building a crude translation chart. Elias kept notes, marking times and locations where the signal grew strongest. Slowly the picture formed. The messages weren't random. They carried structure, intent, and again the same phrase appeared. They are already inside. By the time the station's artificial dawn lights began to glow, Elias had made up his mind. He couldn't keep this to himself much longer. But he also couldn't risk alerting the enemy, whoever or whatever it was that they knew. He looked at his nephew, who had fallen asleep against the console, the datapad still clutched in his hands. Elias felt a surge of pride. The boy was young, yes, but he was sharp, brave, smarter than most officers Elias had served with. Humans were often underestimated in this galaxy. Too reckless, too emotional, too primitive, other species said. But Elias knew better. And now, with Aiden at his side, he felt certain of it. Whatever was whispering through their station's bones, it had made one mistake. It had forgotten that humans listen, and humans always answer back. Captain Elias Carter was not an easy man to wake. Years of service in deep space had trained him to sleep through the endless hum of engines, the creak of metal expanding and contracting, even the occasional jolt of docking maneuvers. Sleep was a luxury in orbit, and he took it seriously. But that night aboard the orbital station Aurora's Crest, something stirred him awake. At first, it was only a faint sound, a soft hiss like air moving through a crack in the wall. Elias frowned in his sleep, shifting beneath his blanket. The sound grew sharper, more deliberate. Footsteps. The captain's eyes snapped open. He pushed himself upright, the dim glow of the cabin lights casting pale shadows across the room. His instinct screamed that someone was inside. His hand moved automatically toward the small locker near his bunk where he kept his sidearm. Then he froze. It wasn't an intruder. Not in the way he first thought. Standing at the edge of his room, looking both guilty and nervous, was a boy. Aiden? Elias whispered, blinking in disbelief. The boy flinched at the sound of his name. His dark hair was messy, and he clutched a small handheld pad close to his chest like it was a shield. He was 12 years old, far too young to be sneaking around the sleeping quarters of a space station at this hour. Uncle Eli. Aiden whispered back, his voice shaking. I had to come. I heard something. Elias exhaled slowly, lowering his hand away from the locker. Relief washed over him, but it was followed quickly by annoyance. The boy had been entrusted to him for this tour aboard the station, his parents confident that the great Captain Carter would keep their son safe and disciplined. This was not part of that promise. It's the middle of the night, Elias said in a firm but quiet tone. What are you doing here, sneaking into my cabin? Aiden stepped closer, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and urgency. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing. Voices, Elias raised an eyebrow. Voices from where? The vents, Aiden said, pointing upward at the ceiling where thin grills lined the edges. I thought it was just the station systems, but then I listened closer. It wasn't random noise. Someone was talking, whispering. The boy's voice trembled, but there was no doubt in his expression. He believed what he was saying. Elias sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. He had dealt with frightened recruits, jittery crewmen, even civilians who swore they saw ghosts in the stars. Space had a way of playing tricks on the human mind, especially when loneliness or fear crept in. But his nephew was neither lonely nor untrained. Aiden was bright, brilliant even for his age, with an obsession for codes, patterns, and puzzles. Still, Elias wanted to dismiss it. You probably heard the comms bleed into the ducts. Happens all the time on older stations. It's nothing to worry about. But Aiden shook his head stubbornly. No, Uncle Eli, it wasn't human voices. It was something else. Those words made Elias pause. Something in the boy's tone carried weight, like he wasn't just imagining it. He had studied the sound. Before Elias could reply, the cabin lights flickered. For a brief second, the room dimmed to black before the glow returned. A soft crackle echoed from the comm panel near the door, followed by static. Elias frowned. That wasn't normal, see? Aiden whispered, gripping his pad tighter. It's happening again. Elias slid out of bed and stood towering over the boy. He wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe a systems glitch, maybe a passing communication surge. But his instincts told him this was worth checking. He had trusted those instincts for decades, and they had kept him alive in more than one dangerous situation. All right, Elias said finally. Show me. Aiden's eyes lit up with relief. He hurried to the vent near the corner of the room, kneeling down with his pad. He pressed the small device against the grill, adjusting its sensors. A faint hum filled the air. For a moment there was nothing but static. Then, through the noise, a sound emerged. It wasn't clear words. It wasn't even a language Elias recognized. But it was structured. Tones and pauses, rhythms too deliberate to be random. Like whispers half swallowed by the air. Elias felt a chill creep up his spine. You recorded this? He asked. Aiden nodded quickly, tapping his pad. The screen displayed a wave pattern, jagged but repeating. I've been tracking it since yesterday. It's not random noise, Uncle Eli, it's a signal. Elias leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't a communications specialist, but he knew enough to see the pattern. It was too ordered to be an accident. Aiden lowered his voice as if afraid the vents themselves might hear. It's coming from inside the station. The captain's jaw tightened. That wasn't possible, or at least it shouldn't have been. External transmissions could leak into the systems, sure, but internal ones? That suggested something, or someone, was broadcasting right under their noses. Elias put a steadying hand on Aiden's shoulder. You should have reported this to security, not crept into my cabin in the middle of the night. They wouldn't listen, Aiden insisted. They tell me I'm just a kid making things up. But I know I'm right. I can prove it. Elias studied the boy's face. There was fear there, yes, but more than that, there was determination. The same stubborn spark Elias had seen in himself when he was younger. The same refusal to let go of a hunch even if others mocked it. For a long moment, the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the station's life support systems. Then Elias nodded slowly. Fine, you've got my attention. But if we're going to look into this, we do it my way. Carefully, understood? Aiden's relief was so visible it was almost a smile. Understood. Elias straightened, glancing at the flickering panel once more. A strange unease settled in his chest. He had commanded starships through asteroid fields, negotiated with hostile colonies, and stared down pirates without flinching. But this whispering signal buried in his own station felt different. It wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't just the imagination of a boy. Something had crept into Aurora's crest while its people slept, and Elias Carter, for the first time in years, felt the sharp edge of uncertainty. He looked down at his nephew. The boy's eyes were wide, bright with both fear and curiosity. All right, Aiden, Elias said quietly. Show me everything you've found. If there's a ghost in this machine, we're going to hunt it down. And so in the middle of the night, Captain and child sat together in the glow of a small datapad, listening to the whispers of something alien moving through the bones of their station.